Hello and welcome to Acoustic RGJ. My name is Roy Johnson. This is the second video looking at the different types of guitars that are available these days, aimed specifically at those people looking to buy a guitar for the first time who've no experience, either purchasing one for themselves or maybe purchasing one for a child who's going to be starting off having guitar lessons. Hopefully you may have seen the earlier video that kind of comes with these two that I've done, which kind of looks at the three different types of guitars, acoustic, electric and classical. So this is the next step, and we're going to be focusing on steel strung acoustic guitars. Steel string guitars were brought to prominence by a company called Martin Guitars, or as they were known early on, CF Martin. They're brought to prominence by a guy called Christian Frederick Martin, who emigrated to America around 1833. And in those days there were kind of classical guitars about with nylon strings. Well, in fact, in those days it would have been gut strings. And gut was kind of quite expensive, relatively. And in America steel was cheap. And in order to compete with the volume that is pushed out by banjos, mandolins and violins, Martin developed guitars using steel strings. So by using steel strings, CF Martin was able to produce louder guitars. And he also developed the strutting. Strutting is the kind of the fan shape pieces of wood that go on the inside of the guitar in order to withstand the tension produced by steel strings. Nowadays there are many different types of acoustic guitar, certainly in terms of shape and size. As you can see, I've got three examples around me and they're all kind of pretty different. I'll go through each of those a little bit later on in the video. As well as the different styles of physical guitar themselves, there's a huge amount of different types of music which is played on them, from blues to bluegrass to fingerstyle folk music, instrumental stuff, and of course song accompaniment. And I think you'll all be familiar with the sound of acoustic guitars, but compared to classical guitars, they tend to be a lot kind of brighter, more zingy, and arguably a little bit more percussive, certainly when strummed. In terms of the construction of the guitar, there's not a huge amount of difference between a steel guitar and a classical guitar in terms of the basic shape. The nut, this is slightly different on this guitar, but actually the nut on an acoustic guitar, or the width of the neck, is usually a little bit narrower than on the classical guitar. It makes it more comfortable for playing kind of chord shapes, really. Generally speaking, and there's huge exceptions to this, from the nut to the body of the guitar there tend to be 14 frets rather than 12 frets in a classical guitar, which makes the scale length slightly longer. And as I said before, the strings made up of steel, some combination of bronze or nickel, attached by the machine heads at the top, which are usually geared so you can kind of adjust the tuning fairly smoothly. And most often they'll have a kind of what they call a ball end at the bottom, and that goes to the hole in the guitar and it's held in by one of these bridge pins. As I mentioned before, to withstand the stress put on the guitar by the steel strings themselves, the strutting formation is made a little bit thicker than on the classical guitar, and it just prevents the whole thing from kind of buckling. And also often you'll find there's what's known as a truss rod. So a truss rod sits between the neck, which is the brown bit here, I don't know if you can see that, the neck, and the fingerboard. And basically it's a metal rod which is anchored at the top of the head and just inside the body. And what it does, it counters the pull of the strings. Without a truss rod, the neck is likely to warp, but it also sets a slight bow purposely in the neck, so that when the string is plucked, it doesn't vibrate against the frets in the middle of the guitar. Okay, so what I thought I'd do is I'll just play a couple of pieces on each guitar, just to give you an idea of what the two different sounds of the guitar are. So this first guitar is what's known as a Dreadnought guitar. It's got a big body, slightly narrower at the front than it is at the back, 14 frets to the neck, And the big body means that it can produce a lot of volume. Great if you're playing in a kind of a band situation against other, or you're competing against other instruments, or in a big venue. Okay, so this guitar, a sweet little guitar actually. It's actually a Richwood Parlor guitar. So it's similar in kind of size really to a classical guitar, in that there are 12 frets from the nut to the body, although the neck I suppose is maybe slightly wider than a typical kind of acoustic guitar. Parlor guitars really are designed to play fingerstyle. They're quite small, quite compact, and hopefully it's in tune. Okay, so by way of comparison, here we go. Okay, so interestingly, I think fingerpicking wise, this sounds slightly clearer than the Dreadnought, but I think strumming wise, I think the Dreadnought sounds a bit more tight. Okay, so finally, this is a Mayson guitar, and it's a cutaway version. So that's the cutaway. Just provides a little more access to the 12th frets, but it's 14 frets to the body. This is kind of what you probably know as a tremolo size. Okay, so yeah, again, quite nice guitar, played fingerstyle and strumming, and I suppose that's why they're a good popular choice, because this style of guitar, the size of guitar, is a good all-rounder. I still think that tone-wise, the little Parlor guitar had a nice tone. Had a kind of like I don't know, I'd call it kind of a boxy tone. But as you see, and this is just a small sample, every guitar sounds different. Even if you look at two identical guitars in specification, you could play them and one might sound slightly different to the other. So the other thing just to bear in mind in terms of thinking about guitars is what the woods are made of. So this little Parlor guitar here has a spruce top, and in this case it's got rosewood back and sides, and it'll have an ebony fingerboard and a mahogany neck. This one, yeah, as I was playing it, I thought it sounded a little bit kind of warmer, possibly. That's because this has got a cedar top, and with classical guitars also, cedar tends to have a lighter, warmer sound. And I think this looks like it's probably got mahogany back and sides actually. This has got an old guitar actually. This was made in 1989. And it's got a spruce top. The spruce is usually quite a white wood. This one's aged, so it's sort of yellowing a bit now. Rosewood back and sides, mahogany neck, ebony fingerboard, and it's got a kind of a mother of pearl inlay around the rosette. Yeah, so all these three guitars that I showed you, they've all got what are called solid, they're all made of solid wood, i.e. the piece of wood made from the front and the sides and the back are all made from one one single sheet of wood that has been sawn from the trunk of a tree. Increasingly what they call tone woods are becoming more expensive and more hard to come by. So to reduce the cost, manufacturers have started using something called laminate. So laminate is a kind of, think of it as a plywood. We've got very thin sections of wood which are kind of glued together, and then they'll have a veneer put over the top. So the veneer could be maple, or it could be spruce, or it could be cedar, and you really can't tell by looking at them. The only way you can tell, or one of the ways of telling, is by looking at the edge of the sound hole, because on a solid piece of wood you'll see the grain will actually drop down, and you can see the edge of you see the grain on the edge of the sound hole. With laminate you can't, because obviously that grain just stops on the top layer, and then there's 2 or 3 other layers of other wood beneath it. Pros and cons of laminate versus solid wood. Solid wood arguably give you a nicer tone. Laminate, because of the glue, tends to restrict the vibration of the wood, so you don't get quite those warm coloured tones that you do with solid wood. But laminate is much cheaper, and it's pretty strong as well, because the glue obviously makes it strong. So it comes down really to budget mainly. I think the important thing though is when buying a guitar, if you've never played one before, is take someone with you who can play, or ask the shop assistant to play something for you. Listen to it with your eyes shut and get them to play 2 or 3 guitars one after the other. But use your ears to make the decision which guitar you want to buy, and not your eyes. And finally, don't be sold by the flash inlay and stuff. Inlay can be done really cheaply these days. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Please subscribe to my channel Acoustic RGJ, hit the bell icon, and I look forward to sending you more videos soon.